Hey everybody, Jim here. I know it's been a minute. It's been more than a minute since I've been on the podcast, and so I apologize for that. The job got in the way, life got in the way, but today is a new day. I am recommitting back to the podcast. I have a whole long laundry list of things and topics that I want to talk about, and so we're going to start off again today. The scheduling is going to be about every 2 weeks right now as we kind of get our feet back underneath of us and get going. But yes, the podcast is back. I'm re-energized. I'm excited. And we're going to talk about Wi-Fi. We're going to talk about RUCKUS. We're going to talk about anything and everything that you kind of come to expect from this channel. So again, I apologize for the long absence, but I'm back and we're going to make this a good season. So stay with me. Got a good show coming up next, so hopefully you forgive me, and we'll keep going. All right, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jim Palmer, your host. I'm going to go solo for a while, and so you're just going to have to listen to me ramble on about everything that comes into my mind. And today, if you can't tell, if you're watching it on YouTube, you've already figured it out, but if you're listening to the podcast, today's episode is titled Stop Mounting Your APs Like You Hate Physics. Over the past year or so, I've been traveling the country. I've been dealing with problems. I've been, working on problem networks, designs, stuff like that. And I got to tell you that there was one thing that kept sort of coming back up as I was, traveling around and fixing problems and solving problems and stuff like that. And it has to do with the mounting orientation of APs. You can see over my shoulder here, I got a couple of APs. I got an R850, that's an R770 actually, that I use for testing and stuff like that. And what you'll see is I've actually mounted those things hanging from the shelf. All right, I got a shelf right there. We got some W-lamp eyes. I got some sniffers, got hats, got stuff. But what you notice is those APs are hanging with what we call dome down. And we do that because that's how the AP is engineered. That's how the AP is designed to be mounted. We do have a type of AP, the wall plate AP, that is designed to be mounted on the wall. And we call that on the wall like a clock. And, those are designed to be mounted that way. And it used to be in the past, we would come up and we would see stuff, and we'd see APs that were mounted incorrectly. We keep saying stuff like, oh, this is bad phi, this is bad phi. And it's funny because twice over the past month, I've been traveling with my wife, and I've pointed at different APs that have been mounted. I've basically given up, and she's given up. And she just knows that when we go places, I'm going to point out APs and either tell her why it's like that, why it shouldn't be like that, or, and this is really weird, it was on two separate occasions we were traveling where I pointed to an AP and it was mounted on the wall like a clock. And I looked at her and I said, now normally we would call that bad phi. We would say, hey, this is the incorrect way in which we want to mount an AP. I said, but I give them a pass on this one. I was like, because I understand what they're trying to do. They're literally trying to limit the RF to keep it from where they want it to go. As most of you know, I'm sort of an antenna guy. And so one of the things I always tell people is, hey, directional antennas are good for really two things, and everybody kind of gets those reversed. Most people will tell you a directional antenna is great for getting the signal where you want it. That's true, but it's not the primary reason why I use a directional antenna. I use a directional antenna to keep the signal from where I don't want it. And so there's actually been a couple of different projects I've worked on over the past few months where the designer, not me, had called for directional antennas, and they put the directional antenna on a pole, and they had to put two of them because they wanted one directional antenna to point this direction and one antenna to point the other direction. because you're like, oh, I'm trying to get that signal as far out to the sides as I can. You're trying to push that envelope, get it out there. Except, sadly enough, in a lot of different scenarios, that's not the right call. The right call is actually to use an Omni, because you've doubled the number of APs you need. You've doubled the number of channels that you need. And a lot of times you don't get that additional signal where you actually think you're getting it. That gain that you're getting isn't quite as good as you might hope and you might think. But you've doubled your cost. You've doubled your port counts. You've doubled all these other different things, your cable runs, your monitoring. I mean, there's licensing, all these things that happen when you put in a back-to-back, because you're like, oh, I'm trying to get that signal into one spot. But you sort of forget that whole thing of the point of a directional antenna is not to really get it into the spot. It's to keep the other RF from where you don't want it. And so that's kind of the challenge that we run into. And a lot of times designers will know that. And, we put it on our designs, we show it, stuff like that. And then what ends up happening is we hand it off to the installer. And if you've watched my presentation from WLPC a few years ago, you know that one of my sayings is, no good design survives first contact with an installer. So what I want to talk about today is not necessarily indoor APs, right? There and there, if I can point the right way. I'm not talking about those today. Those are pretty simple, right? The R series hangs, the H series on the wall, wall plate. What's the other term for it? Hospitality AP. That has the Ethernet ports. We all get that. We all know that. And for the most part, that's a pretty well solved thing. What I want to talk to you about today are external antennas, the T-series, the RUCKUS T-series APs. Now, I actually have learned to love, over the past year and a half, really learned to love our external antennas. I'll be honest with you, before, I didn't have it. But, after the past 18 months of being in the job I'm in, I realized that, hey, you know what? Yeah, RUCKUS actually makes some really good external APs. And then I started traveling to these sites because they were like, oh, it's not working the way that we want it to work. It's not working the way that we hoped it would work. And so I would get there, and what I would notice is they mounted them wrong. And I don't think it was a malicious thing. I don't think it was something where they said, hey, we're just going to wake up today and we're going to choose violence when it comes to how we install the APs. I think they just get used to this is how APs are installed. And unlike some of our competitors, because of Beamflex and because of the way we do things at RUCKUS, it's not as clear cut and it's not as easy to the untrained installer. So today I'm going to take some time and we're going to talk about an external AP, what that looks like, how you can tell the difference, and then what that means when you start talking about an installer. Because what you'll notice is you can actually, if you can get some pictures back from your installer, it's really easy to kind of look at and go, oh, you know what? This is a problem. And if they can send them to you before they leave the site, you can tell them, hey, you have to change the way that AP is installed because you've installed it incorrectly, and we need to get it in the correct orientation so that the signal level that we predict in our predictive modeling tools, and any predictive modeling tool is going to work exactly the same. So it doesn't even matter which tool you use, right? Because it's more about how the AP is designed and engineered. So let's talk about that. Now, for the sake of this thing and having my lovely camera here for you guys to see me, and if you're listening to this, you should probably go to the to YouTube and watch the video here, because we're going to go and we're going to take a look at things. And the first thing I want to show is the RUCKUS T350C. Let's see if I can get the glare off of it a little bit. I really like this AP. And RUCKUS has 3 different versions of the T350. There's a T350C, the T350D, and a T350 SE. Now, I don't have an SE model to hold up, but we're going to start with the base model, which is the C model. This is this guy right here. As you can tell, it's not much bigger than your hand. It's a nice little AP. It's got the LEDs down here on the bottom. stuff like that. And what I want to pay special attention to is you're going to have one side right down here that'll have your PoE port, and other models will have other types of thing. You'll have a port here, or you'll have like a USB port here. All right. So those and those are just the ancillary stuff. But more importantly, I don't want to talk about this side. I want to talk about this side right here, because the C and the D models, these are classified as omnidirectional APs, right? I'm going to hold this over here so I can kind of get it on screen. We're going to do it just like this. So the C and the D models are what they call omnidirectional. That's the marketing term. Technically, it's actually a semi-hemispherical antenna. And what that means is it's designed to be mounted just like the APs behind me here, behind my head. It's designed to be mounted with the dome right here. Here's our dome, right? That dome facing down, because then we get the signal that comes down this way. Now it's a 360 pattern that goes horizontally, but it's not a 360 pattern that goes vertically, right? And we're going to see this here in a minute. But because the energy from this AP is focused from the midpoint of the AP right here down, and then in a 360 pattern around it. So if I were to hold this thing over my head, right, all the signal is going to be coming around me this way, and it's going to be focused down. That's a semi-hemispherical antenna. And so that's really the pattern we're looking at. But like I said, this is a C model, and there's a D model, and it has, like I said, the D model will have some other little, has another port and the USB, ancillary stuff. The radios work the same. The other difference is that the D model has a higher temperature rating. But both of these APs are designed to be mounted dome down. All right, so if you see the picture and you said, hey, I want a C model antenna, or C model, C or D model AP, and they go, and you go, yep, this is how it's mounted dome down, then they've mounted it correctly, and if it's in the correct spot and you get the configuration right, it's going to perform and behave exactly the way that you want it to. So, problem solved. Now, let's talk about the third model that Ruckus makes in the T350 series. It's the T350 SE. There's also a T750 and a T750 SE. I didn't get those because, quite frankly, they're really, really big. And if I were to hold it, it would be like just the camera doesn't work. So that's why we stuck with the T350, because we can show it. I can get my hands. We can do all that stuff. So T750 SE, T350 SE, those SE models, those are the models that I really want to talk about, because those are not semi-hemispherical or direct or omni APs. Those are directional APs. They have beamflex arrays inside the AP. So when you look at it like this, it looks very similar. It's a little bit bigger, but it's very similar. So if you're not an AP nerd like most of us, the installers will look at it and go, that's the same thing, because they're not going to realize that the AP is a little bit larger than the other models, especially if you have just a few of the C or the D models and a bunch of the SE models. It's really hard to just look at it and pick it out by the size and go, I can tell you that size is different, and so it needs to be mounted differently. The way you can tell the difference between an SE model and a normal omni or semi-hemispherical, and this applies for the T750 to the T350, is actually right here on this side away from the Ethernet ports. So the Ethernet ports are down on this side along with the USB. The opposite side of the AP, up here where you have your little grounding lug, the grounding lug is the tell. So you take a look at the side that has the grounding lug. It's also opposite the LEDs, and it's the same side where it'll have the logo, Ruckus. So we're going to look at this side right here. It has some cooling fins and then the grounding lug. However, if we switch over and we take a look, this is a quick install guide for the T350 SE, the AP right here, that rear view right here. what you'll notice is we have the RUCKUS logo. And then underneath that, where you'd have the grounding lug, there's a couple of N female ports labeled 1 and 2 here on the screen. N female ports with a cap. It's a weatherproof cap that ships with it. If you see an AP that has those N female ports with the cap on it and it's installed dome down, that is not the traditional installation orientation for that AP. So technically, we could call that bad fi. Now, I'm not going to call it bad fi because there are times, especially in warehouses, where I'll take a T350 SE and I'll point that thing straight down, mounted on the ceiling, like you would a normal AP, like it's up here over my shoulder, like we were talking about, right? And I do that for a very specific reason. And I want to show you what that is. But you can tell the T350 will have two of those N female ports. The T750 SE will have 4 of those N female ports with the caps on it. So if you see that, and you see those ports, and they're sitting, pointing out to the sides, that is a non-standard orientation of mounting that AP. If they're up, if they're pointed up in the air, that's the standard orientation. Now let me show you why. We're going to take a look at the physics, because that's where I live. That's where I love. So here's the physics, right? Now, this is actually a school. It's not too far from my house. Well, not too far. I live in the western part of the U.S., so not too far as this is about 8 miles away. And I like using athletic fields, as you can see here, because it's actually showing like distances and lengths and stuff like that. All right. And so what I have right here is I have an AP here in the center of this field, and we have an AP at the end. Now, this is a standard American sized football field at a high school. So it is 300 feet or 100 yards from end zone to end zone. The end zones are 10 yards. So it's 320 yards across that. And what I want to point out is we're going to come down here to the bottom. And if we zoom in, what you're going to notice on this AP here, as I zoom really in, because I want to show you this arrow. So when you see an arrow in your design tool, that is a directional AP. So you don't even have to click on the model yet to find out what directional AP that is. What that tells you is that arrow means that it has a face. The AP has a face, and where that AP faces is going to really determine and dictate the type of coverage that you have, right? So now that we've seen that little arrow, we're going to zoom back out. This is here at the end of the end zone. We're going to come back up here to the one at midfield. Move this guy up here so he's right at midfield. Let's adjust him down here. And what you'll notice is on this guy, no arrow, 0 arrow. So that arrow isn't pointing anywhere because it doesn't have an arrow pointing somewhere. That means it's domed down. So when we click on it, you can see this is a T350C right here. Its mounting type is on the ceiling because it's a dome down, right? Now, the other way you could do this would be in a wall mount or an L mount, because it's going to go either on a wall or a pole, and you're going to have it so it's going to be mounted perpendicular to the mounting surface, like this, and that radiation pattern comes down. I did both of these APs at 12 feet, and I left the powers at 6 and 10. Power doesn't matter here. We're talking about antenna patterns, and that's what I want to really focus on. So let's talk about this AP that I have here in my hands that we were looking at. So let's come up here. I'm going to turn on some Wi-Fi signals so we can take a look at that signal. We're looking at 5 gigahertz right here. We're going to click on this one AP. Now, what you're going to notice here is that this AP literally has a very omnidirectional type of pattern to it, right? If we take a look at the pattern right here, What you'll notice, in the 3D settings is, yeah, you got a little bit of nulls right there on the bottom. If we rotate this way, we can actually kind of let that thing go until we say, oh, that's probably about here is what the pattern is that we're looking at. So that's literally how we're looking at it. And so from a visual perspective, what we're doing is we're standing over top of it, looking straight down. And so we have that 360 pattern this way. But what you'll notice is if you were to stand and look at it from the side, then you definitely don't have a 360 pattern. What you'll see is on this green part right up here, there's like that little green ridge right here. That's the middle of the AP. Now, this is how it's supposed to be mounted. What happens if we take our AP right here and we say, oh, we're going to mount it and we're going to point it it's on a wall and it's on a pole, and we're going to point that thing with the dome facing somewhere. What happens to that signal when we do that? Yeah, so what you're going to notice is this is not a standard pattern that you would expect to get from any AP. So if you've designed and you've called for a T350C and you want that thing mounted in a standard normal type of configuration, which would either be a ceiling or a wall, but either way, you want that AP pointed down. As soon as you take it and you say, oh, let me turn it to the right. We're going to have this AP up here and we're going to mount it like it's an AP, like a wall on a clock. And then you go, oh, well, let's put it here. Now you can put some down tilt on it. Watch what happens when we add a little bit about 15 degree down tilt onto this AP, right? Now you're pointing like this. If you're a little bit higher, let's make that a 25 degree down tilt, like this, right? What you're seeing is these nulls here and here are getting very pronounced. And so even though you think you're shooting directly at it, what's happening is you have these lobes that come out here to the sides and you have nothing behind it. But remember, this AP does not have any of those end female plugs right there. So what happens is you take this AP, you say, I'm going to mount it, on a pole, give it a little bit of down tilt. This is the signal that you're going to end up with here, not the signal that you were planning for, which should be mounted like this. Now, let's do the inverse of this. Let's say we have an SE model. Remember, it's got the two or the four end female plugs on there. So we're going to come down here. We're going to take a look at this AP. This is a T350 SE. It's mounted on a wall or a pole at 12 feet. We can come down here, same power level, doesn't matter. And what you notice is this gives you that directional pattern like you were really expecting. We have nothing coming off that back lobe, right? Because what we're doing is more importantly, we're trying to keep that signal from coming back here. Now you want to do that if you're in a high dense environment and you're trying to separate cells and keep those things sort of contained. You're like, I want to make sure I don't get anything back there. Or, and especially if you were to say, hey, I'm in a situation like this, whereas you come down here, we got some tennis courts here, but then we got the main road. We got this parking lot. So you could, in essence, take this AP here, and you can move this AP over to here, and you'd be like, hey, you know what? I want to get all of my signal over here where I want it. We can put some real power into this thing. We'll make that 22, which is 3 dB down from max power. We'll put a little bit of down tilt on this thing. Or no, that's the orientation. We're going to put about a 15 degree down tilt onto this thing. And even then, right, what you notice when we do that is we still end up with this null right here. So that's even the way it's supposed to be mounted, that directional. You're still ending up with that null. Now, I'll show you one little other thing that I like to do. What if you take that thing and you rotate it? Look at that. I took a T350 SE, that has a 110, but it has a very narrow vertical. And I rotated that AP. I'm going to switch back over to just me, right, for a second, right? Because normally you say, hey, I want this AP like this. I'm going to give it a little bit of down tilt. But if you take that AP and you rotate it and you mount it like this, so you're pointing down like that, right? So this is very non-standard. You would not, most people wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to take my AP, rotate it 90 degrees from how, because look, we got the nice label, we got the Ethernet cable that's going to come out the bottom, it all looks really nice and fun. But if you take that thing and you rotate it 90 degrees so that you have your LEDs on one side, and then you'd have your, your little 2N females, and then you have this guy right here, right down here, right? If you take that thing and you mount it like this, and you angle it down like that, take a look at what it looks like. We now have a very narrow focused. And so now I can start putting in multiple APs mounted horizontally the way they're not supposed to be, like this. And I can get you some really nice coverage, some really tight cells that are going to reach out and really touch somebody. So the problem we have now is we're actually reaching out really far, and those clients that are on the other side of this football field are not going to be able to talk back as well. So we're going to add in a little bit more down tilt like that, and we can actually start to contain these APs so that we can get these really tight cells that we really want to get. Look at that. Like, this is some crazy, I love this stuff. I love physics. So now look at that. Now I have a very tight cell, but I'm very pointed down, right? Now, I'm going to show you one last thing before I run out of time. What happens if we take this same AP and we don't mount it on a wall? We don't mount it on a pole. What if we mount it on a ceiling? I'm going to drag it back here into the center of my football field, right? I have a very nice narrow beam. Now, if I'm doing a warehouse, I have aisles, right? And I want to be able to reuse channels throughout my aisles. Now, my aisles are going to help me contain that signal so it doesn't leak left and right into the other aisles. But I have more than 3 channels, at least at 5 and 6, right? And so what you do is you take that AP, you mount it on the ceiling like it's not supposed to be. And then that arrow right here, right, this arrow that we see, that is now the top. That is the top of the AP. That's where the logo is, and that's where those 2 and female ports are. And then if you need to rotate that thing, all you do is you grab that thing, you rotate it, and now you can have an SE AP mounted on the ceiling, pointed straight down in a very long type of configuration. Remember, this is at 12 feet. If you take a look at a warehouse that maybe's got like, say 30 feet, look at that. We have a very nice signal right there that, and then it's still going to be contained, but it'll go. I mean, that's easily, that's 300 feet. That's 100 meters. Easy, if not more. I mean, that fills up the whole entire inside of that track. So, if you're doing warehouses, use physics. Don't go ahead and try to be, other things. Pay attention to your APs, pay attention to how they're mounted, how they're rotated, and get that signal to make sure. And then as a designer, learn what that looks like from a picture standpoint. So when that installer sends you a picture, you're sitting there in your office, at your house, in your place of business, and they send you that thing, take a look at it, and you can immediately know, hey, did they put that AP, whether it's an SE model, directional, or an Omni, did they put it where I want it, and did they point it the way I wanted it to? And you can very quickly tell just by looking at a picture very fast whether or not you're going to get that signal that you designed is going to actually show up in the end product. So thanks for suffering through the episode with me. And hopefully you'll join me on the next episode. I got some good stuff coming up. I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to talk about it. But hopefully you'll join me next time when I ramble on about some more stuff that have to do with Wi-Fi and technology. Hey there. Thanks for listening. If you like the show and haven't done so, please like and subscribe. If you want to contact the show directly, you can email us at ruckcast@comscope.com. I do read those emails. To learn more about any Ruckus products or services that we've talked about on this or any other prior podcast, please check out our About section of the show or the show notes. And as always, thank you for listening.